Ethan Miller used to believe that friendship was the one constant in life, the quiet space between chaos and comfort. With Noah Carter, that had always been true. Their bond stretched back to college, to the years when sleepless nights and shared secrets meant more than any promise could. They had drifted apart for a time, each pulled into the responsibilities of adulthood, yet whenever they met, it felt like no time had passed at all. That Friday evening, the city glowed with the orange hue of streetlights reflecting off wet pavement. Sarah, Ethan's wife, had left earlier that morning to visit her parents for the weekend. Her absence brought a strange stillness to the house, the kind Ethan rarely noticed until it surrounded him. He tried to distract himself with television, but every laugh track felt hollow, every commercial too loud. When his phone buzzed and Noah's name appeared, he felt a rush of relief he didn't want to admit. Noah's voice carried its usual warmth, but beneath it was fatigue. His apartment had flooded after a burst pipe, leaving him temporarily displaced. "Man, I just need somewhere to crash tonight," Noah said, half laughing at his misfortune. Ethan didn't hesitate, old habits of friendship resurfaced before reason could intervene. "Of course. Come over," he replied, trying not to sound too eager. When Noah arrived, soaked and shivering, Ethan noticed how exhaustion clung to him like the dampness in his clothes. They shared an awkward laugh as Ethan handed him a towel. "Still the same clumsy guy from college," Ethan teased. Noah smiled, that familiar crooked grin that always seemed to soften a room. They talked as Ethan reheated leftovers, the conversation flowing easily, work, life, the dull weight of routine. It felt natural, safe. After dinner, they discovered the guest room heater had stopped working. The house was cold, and the temperature outside was dropping fast. "You can take my bed," Ethan offered, but Noah shook his head. "No way. We've shared worse back in college." His tone was light, joking, but the moment lingered. Ethan laughed it off and agreed. Later that night, the two of them lay under the same blanket, the room lit only by the dim glow of the streetlight seeping through the curtains. The air carried the faint scent of rain and detergent. It was strange, Ethan thought, how silence could feel so loud when shared with someone who knew you too well. They talked softly, about nothing and everything. Noah mentioned his recent breakup, his voice low and edged with fatigue. "I think I'm just tired of pretending to be fine," he admitted. Ethan turned slightly toward him, sensing something heavier beneath those words but not knowing how to ask. "You'll find someone better," Ethan said automatically, though it sounded empty. Noah laughed quietly. "You always say that. Maybe I don't need to find someone better. Maybe I just need to figure out why I keep chasing the wrong kind of people." Ethan didn't answer. His mind drifted to Sarah, how distant she had been lately, her affection fading into routine. They spoke like partners managing a schedule, not a life. He wondered when that had happened, when comfort had turned into quiet disinterest. Noah shifted beside him, close enough for Ethan to feel the warmth radiating through the thin sheet. "You ever think about how weird it is?" Noah asked softly. "How people can be so close for years, and then suddenly, it's like they don't even see each other anymore." Ethan hesitated. "Yeah," he said after a moment. "I think about it more than I should." The pause that followed wasn't awkward, it was charged. The sound of rain tapping against the window filled the space between them. Ethan's thoughts became heavy, knotted. He wanted to move, to create distance, but something in him stayed still. Noah chuckled under his breath. "You always overthink things," he whispered, turning on his side to face Ethan. His tone was teasing, but his eyes, soft and searching in the dim light, held something else. Ethan forced a small smile. "And you never think enough," he replied, trying to lighten the mood, but the room didn't feel light anymore. It felt suspended, like time had thinned to a moment neither could name. Ethan could feel Noah's breath, slow and steady, and it made his chest tighten with something he didn't want to understand. That he closed his eyes, hoping the feeling would fade, that the night would swallow whatever unspoken thing lingered between them. But it didn't fade, it deepened. Noah broke the silence. "You remember that trip senior year? When the car broke down and we slept in the back seat, freezing all night. Ethan opened his eyes and smiled faintly. Yeah. You wouldn't stop talking about ghosts just to keep me awake. I did it because you looked scared, Noah said, his voice gentle. You always pretended you weren't, but I could tell. Ethan turned his head toward him. Their eyes met, briefly, too briefly, and something electric passed between them, something dangerously honest. He looked away almost immediately. I wasn't scared, he muttered, but his voice was quieter than he intended. Neither spoke after that. The rain continued outside, steady, rhythmic, almost soothing. Noah shifted again, just slightly closer, the mattress dipping under his weight. Ethan felt every inch of space vanish. He told himself it was nothing, that they were friends, that this was harmless. But his heartbeat betrayed him. He felt the tension coil beneath his ribs, a quiet panic mixed with something else he couldn't name. Minutes passed, maybe more. He kept his eyes on the ceiling, counting the shadows. Then, softly, Noah said, "Thanks for letting me stay, man. I don't think I could handle another night alone." "Anytime," Ethan replied, his voice steadier than he felt. When Noah's breathing slowed, falling into sleep, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The faint rise and fall of Noah's shoulder beside him felt too close, too human, too familiar. He wanted to believe it was just friendship, that the ache in his chest was empathy, not longing. But the more he tried to convince himself, the more that certainty unraveled. In the stillness, Ethan's thoughts wandered, back to Sarah, to the version of himself that had once been sure of everything. He realized, with a quiet dread, that certainty was the first thing to go when you began to feel something you shouldn't. As the rain eased into a whisper, he turned slightly away, eyes half closed, pretending to sleep. But he couldn't. He could still feel Noah's presence beside him, steady and warm, like gravity pulling him towards something he wasn't ready to face. And in that quiet, between the rhythm of breathing and rain, Ethan understood that something inside him had shifted, imperceptibly, but permanently. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just lay there, waiting for morning, knowing that when it came, nothing would feel quite the same again. Morning sunlight spilled through tall windows, painting the room in quiet gold. Eli blinked awake, momentarily disoriented by the warmth of the blanket and the scent of brewed coffee floating through the air. For a fleeting moment, he thought he was home again, before the memory returned like a slow bruise. He sat up, his reflection caught in the mirror across the room, a stranger in borrowed comfort. Outside the door, the low murmur of a man's voice drifted from the kitchen. Daniel Cross moved with the ease of someone used to control, every gesture deliberate, precise. He glanced up as Eli stepped hesitantly into view. "Morning," Daniel said, setting down his tablet. "I wasn't sure how you take your coffee, so I guessed. Hope black isn't too cruel a choice." Eli managed a small smile. "Black's fine. Thank you." He wrapped his hands around the cup, grateful for the warmth, but unsure what to do with the silence that followed. The apartment was sleek but not cold, modern lines softened by books, sketches, and a faint scent of cedarwood. It felt lived in, though meticulously so. Daniel leaned against the counter, studying him without judgment. "You slept nearly 10 hours, he said lightly. "That's a good sign." "I didn't mean to," Eli murmured. "I should probably go." "You've already done enough." Daniel shook his head. "You don't owe me an apology. If you want to leave, I'll drive you. But if you need a few days to get your bearings, you can stay here. There's work I could use help with, sorting digital files, that sort of thing. You'd earn something, not charity." The word work steadied Eli more than he expected. "I could do that," he said quietly. "At least until I figure things out." "Good," Daniel replied with a faint smile. "Then let's start with breakfast." "Real breakfast. You look like you haven't had one in weeks." The meal was simple: eggs, toast, and conversation that wandered cautiously between small talk and silence. Eli learned that Daniel ran a private investment firm, that he built it young and kept mostly to himself. He spoke in a calm, unhurried way that drew trust without asking for it. Over the next few days, Eli settled into a rhythm. He worked from the home office, organizing client files, drafting notes, sometimes just listening to music through Daniel's old speakers. Daniel moved through the house like quiet weather, always composed, rarely still. Yet beneath the composure, Eli sensed a loneliness that mirrored his own. On the fifth evening, the front door opened with the sharp sound of keys, and the air changed. A man entered, tall, polished, his expression coolly assessing. His gaze found Eli first, lingering just long enough to register irritation. "Who's this?" he asked, setting his briefcase down. Daniel looked up from the couch. "Aaron, this is Eli. He's helping me with some projects this week." Aaron's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I see. You've hired an assistant without telling me." "It's temporary," Daniel said evenly. "Eli needed a place to stay. It costs me nothing to help." Eli stood awkwardly, unsure whether to shake hands or disappear. Aaron gave a small nod, polite, dismissive, then turned to Daniel. "We'll talk later." He left the room, and the quiet that followed was heavier than before. Daniel exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. "Don't mind him," he said softly. "He's protective." "Your partner?" Eli asked before he could stop himself. Daniel nodded. "We've been together a few years. It's complicated." Eli said nothing more, but the word complicated stayed with him. The days passed differently after that. Aaron was gone most mornings, but when he was home, tension filled the air like static. Eli often caught fragments of arguments, whispered words through closed doors, the sharp edges of frustration. He pretended not to hear. One afternoon, Daniel joined him in the study, both working in silence until Daniel's voice broke through. "You remind me of myself at your age," he said quietly. "Trying to seem braver than you feel." Eli looked up, startled by the gentleness in his tone. "You don't seem afraid of much." Daniel smiled faintly. "That's because I've learned how to hide it." They spoke for hours after that, about fear, family, the strange loneliness that came from not fitting into the shapes others expected. Eli found himself drawn to Daniel's stillness, the way his voice could turn warmth into safety. There was nothing romantic in their words, but the air between them carried an undercurrent neither of them acknowledged. By the end of the week, Aaron's patience had thinned. He came home early one evening to find Daniel and Eli laughing over old records. The sound froze him in the doorway. "So this is what you do when I'm gone," he said sharply. Daniel rose, calm but weary. "Don't start." "I'm not starting," Aaron shot back. "I'm asking why there's a teenager living in our guest room and sharing dinner with you every night." "I'm 18, Eli said softly, though his voice trembled. Aaron turned his glare on him. "I wasn't asking you." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Enough. Eli stays until he finds his footing. That's all." Aaron laughed, bitterly. "You're playing savior again, Daniel. You always need someone to fix, because fixing people keeps you from fixing yourself." The words landed hard. Eli wanted to disappear. Instead, Daniel said quietly, "You're tired, Aaron. Maybe we both are." Aaron didn't reply. He left the room, the slam of the door echoing through the apartment. Eli sat frozen. "I should go," he whispered. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." Daniel's expression softened. "You didn't. Aaron and I have been unraveling for a long time. You just happened to arrive at the end of it." He looked away then, staring at the city lights beyond the window. "When two people stop hearing each other," he said, "silence becomes the only language left." Eli didn't know what to say. He wanted to comfort him, to thank him, to stay silent all at once. But words felt too fragile for the space between them. The night wore on. Daniel retreated to his room. Eli returned to the guest bed that no longer felt quite safe. Through the wall, he could hear faint voices, an argument breaking into quiet sobs, then nothing. Sometime after midnight, footsteps approached his door. Daniel's voice came softly through the wood. Eli. Are you awake? Yes. I just wanted you to know, I meant what I said. You have nothing to feel guilty for. Some things were ending long before you arrived. Eli hesitated, then replied, thank you. For everything. He heard Daniel exhale, a sound halfway between relief and exhaustion. Then footsteps receded, and the apartment returned to silence. Eli lay staring into the darkness, his chest tight with emotions he couldn't name. Gratitude, confusion, maybe something more dangerous. He knew he should leave soon, that staying would tangle him in someone else's heartbreak, but the thought of walking away felt unbearable. He turned toward the window, watching the reflection of city lights shimmer across the glass. Somewhere down the hall, a door closed softly. The sound was small but final, like the end of something just beginning. Sleep eluded him. The warmth of Daniel's kindness lingered, tangled with guilt and longing. In the stillness, Eli realized that kindness could be as intoxicating as love, and just as dangerous. Days passed, but the silence between Ethan and Noah lingered like a bruise that wouldn't fade. Ethan avoided his phone, his reflection, even his own thoughts. Every vibration of an incoming message from Noah made his stomach tighten. He told himself he was busy, that work needed him, that Sarah's return demanded his attention. But the truth was simpler. He was afraid of what Noah might say, and more afraid of what he might say back. When Sarah returned that Sunday evening, she kissed his cheek and commented on how quiet the house felt. Ethan smiled faintly, pretending nothing had changed. She talked about her parents, about the small-town gossip, about a new cafe that opened down the street. He nodded at all the right moments, but his mind replayed the sound of rain and Noah's voice saying, "Then tell me you don't feel it too." That night, lying beside Sarah, he tried to focus on her warmth, on the familiar rhythm of their life together. But the space between them felt wider than it had before. She rested her hand on his chest for a moment, then turned away, already half asleep. Ethan stared at the ceiling, wondering when their touch had stopped meaning comfort. The next morning, he found a message from Noah. Just 5 words, "Can we talk? Please." Ethan deleted it without replying, but the words stayed with him all day, echoing between tasks, between breaths. By the end of the week, guilt had hardened into restlessness. Avoidance didn't make the feeling disappear, it only made it louder. So when Noah texted again, "I'll be at the cafe at 7. You don't have to come." Ethan didn't plan to, but he went anyway. The cafe was quiet, the air heavy with the scent of coffee and rain-soaked pavement. Noah sat by the window, wearing the same gray jacket from that night. He looked up when Ethan entered, his expression unreadable, neither angry nor hopeful, just tired. Ethan sat down across from him. For a while, neither spoke. The sound of spoons clinking against mugs filled the silence. Finally, Noah broke it. "I wasn't going to text again," he said. "But I didn't want it to end like that." Ethan nodded, staring at his untouched cup. "I know. I didn't mean to mess things up," Noah continued quietly. "I just couldn't pretend it wasn't there." Ethan exhaled slowly. "It's not your fault." Noah gave a small, bitter laugh. "Maybe not. But it feels like it is." Ethan looked up then, meeting his eyes. "You were honest," he said. "That's more than I've been." Noah tilted his head. "Honest about what?" "About how I feel," Ethan admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. About everything. The admission hung in the air, fragile but real. Noah didn't smile. He didn't move closer. He just listened. I keep thinking about that night, Ethan went on. Not because of what almost happened, but because of what it showed me. I've been living half a life. With Sarah, with myself. I thought being a good husband meant keeping everything in order, even if I couldn't feel all of it anymore. Noah's expression softened. And now? Now I don't know who I am when I'm not pretending, Ethan said. But I know I can't keep running from it. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of their honesty filling the space between them. Then Noah spoke carefully. Ethan, I don't want to be the reason your life falls apart. Whatever this is, it doesn't have to become something we regret. Ethan shook his head. You're not the reason. You just made me see what I've been avoiding. Noah looked down at his coffee, tracing the rim of the cup with his finger. So what happens now? I don't know, Ethan said truthfully. I can't give you something I don't understand yet. And I can't lie to Sarah either. Noah nodded slowly. Then maybe it's enough that we were honest. Ethan wanted to believe that. He wanted to believe truth could fix the ache between them, but honesty didn't erase the pull he felt, the connection that had formed in silence. Still, he knew Noah was right. Some truths were meant to be carried, not acted upon. When they stood to leave, Noah hesitated. Take care of yourself, he said softly. You too, Ethan replied. Outside, the rain had stopped. The streets glistened under the pale glow of streetlights, and for the first time in weeks, Ethan noticed the sound of the city again, tires on wet asphalt, laughter from a distant bar, the faint hum of life moving forward. He walked home slowly, his thoughts heavy but clear. When he entered the house, Sarah was reading in bed. She looked up and smiled. You're home late. Yeah, he said. Ran into Noah. How's he doing? Ethan hesitated, then answered simply, better, I think. She nodded and returned to her book. Ethan undressed quietly, sliding into bed beside her. The space felt familiar again, but different somehow, like standing in the same room after moving the furniture. Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder, a small gesture that surprised him. He rested his hand on hers, and for a moment, he felt the weight of what he still had, what he could still choose to repair, but deep inside, the ache remained, not the kind born from guilt, but from knowing something had changed forever. As the night stretched on, Ethan stared into the dark, his thoughts circling like quiet tides. He thought of Noah's words, of the look in his eyes when they parted. There had been no anger, no resentment, only understanding. It was almost worse than goodbye. He wondered if emotional betrayal could be forgiven when no act had been committed, only felt. If the heart could be faithful while its truth drifted elsewhere. When Sarah stirred beside him, mumbling softly in her sleep, Ethan turned toward her and closed his eyes. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, confession, denial, or quiet endurance, but he knew he couldn't pretend ignorance anymore. For the first time in years, he let himself feel everything, the guilt, the longing, the fear, the fragile hope. It was messy, human, and painfully real. As dawn began to rise, faint light touching the curtains, Ethan whispered to himself, sometimes love isn't about who you hold, it's about what you choose to keep holding on to. And though he didn't know where that choice would lead, he knew one thing with quiet certainty: the night he shared with Noah hadn't broken his life. It had revealed it. He closed his eyes again, breathing deeply, the sound of morning birds faint outside the window. Sarah's hand found his in sleep, and he didn't pull away. Between guilt and grace, he lay still, caught between two versions of himself, neither right nor wrong, just human. And in that quiet space, he finally stopped running from the truth.